welcome to Driving Force Radio, where we seek to discover what drives today's leaders. On today's show, it's Community Matters. And there is nothing like that in this season to give and during this holiday season, because community does matter. And working in your communities, partnering in your communities are so important. Today, my co-host is Cristin Tarr, the founder and managing director of Business Service Corps, a Denver-based organization that works with community organizations, nonprofits, as well as businesses, and helps them create these social impact changes and social impact programs that work in our communities. Welcome to the show, Cristin.
Thank you so much for having me again.
So, Cristin, talk a little bit about community partnerships for social impact. What does that mean?
Well, I think we're taking a different road. Corporations and businesses are taking a different road where they, instead of writing just a check each year, once a year, especially this time of year, they're looking at a partnership within the community where they can actually make an impact. Their employees, in-kind donations, volunteerism, and just really giving them maybe intellectual help within the organization, the nonprofit organization, to really bring them to a new level and build capacity of those nonprofits. And it could be just one that they're partnering with or several, depending on the corporation, but all working towards a cause.
Well, and I want to bring that out. As we've seen over the last month or so, so many huge things have gone on here in Colorado as well as around the country. Everything from wildfires here in the West to hurricanes and flooding on the East Coast. So when we talk about these donations of money and in-kind donations and volunteerism, I mean, I think most people think of it at this mass scale.
Yes.
Can it go down to a smaller organization? And if so, what does that look like?
Absolutely. And I think that that's a really good telling consequence or result, rather, of what happens with, for example, with Sandy. You know, the communities across the world came together to help the victims of Sandy. Why can't we do that on a smaller scale with businesses and corporations in their local communities, making an impact, working with nonprofits, working maybe with a governmental agency to really make an impact on an outcome, whether it's education graduation rates, whether it's parks and recs, recreation areas that you want to beautify your area, whatever really is a passionate and aligned with that corporation, they should put all their efforts in and all the resources in order to make that effort, and still make business sense and business value for their organization. And really what the outcome is a better world that we're living in, a better community that we're living in, a stronger community.
Absolutely. And I know today we have three very different organizations in three totally different sectors, but all community organizations that are out there partnering with businesses and non-governmental organizations and all kinds of organizations to really create this change in our communities. Yes?
I am very excited about the three guests we have. There are three different nonprofits that all of them are focusing on youth and children in some capacity, but they're completely different and their outcomes are completely different, and that's what you're going to find today.
I love that. Our first guest is Pat Greenway, the executive director of Colorado-based Listen Foundation. The Listen Foundation was founded in 1969 by a group of dedicated parents whose children were deaf, and yet they had the benefit of a program where they learned to listen and talk with the use of hearing aids and auditory verbal therapy. And so we're going to learn more about the Listen Foundation here, and welcome Pat to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
So Pat, tell us a little bit about the Listen Foundation and what the goal of the organization is.
The Listen Foundation works with children who are deaf and hard of hearing, and we teach them how to learn spoken language by listening. And I know it's hard to get your head around that, because how does a child who's deaf listen? But what happens is when you receive either hearing aids or cochlear implants, you suddenly have access to sound, but your brain doesn't know what to do with that sound. And so what the therapists do with these children is they teach them how to make sense of sound. So they actually learn how to hear. And once you learn how to hear and you can discriminate words and all the sounds in your environment, then you can learn to talk by listening. And that is how you and I learned how to talk.
Sure.
So the result of that is a much more natural sounding voice, and it allows the children to be part of the hearing world.
And the interesting, I've seen or listened to some of the children that have gone through the program, and it's quite different than signing and lip reading. Is that correct?
Oh, it's very different. The main distinction is the listening component. We work very hard on training the auditory center of your brain. And so that's the biggest difference. And what that means to the child is research has shown that at least 50% and up to 90% of what a child learns is through incidental listening, just conversations around them. So if I'm using sign language or I can only lip read, all of that information that's happening around me, I miss out on.
Right.
So that's huge. It's huge from a socialization standpoint, and it's huge from an academic standpoint.
And Jan, I've really sat down and talked to some of these children, and you would not know that they're deaf.
Really?
That's how well their spoken language is just unbelievable. And transformation that happens is pretty remarkable. Why isn't all children that are deaf going through this program?
It's an outreach situation. It's not knowing the program exists. And that's the critical piece that we really need to work on, because with today's technology, with cochlear implants and high-powered hearing aids and auditory verbal therapy, all children that have a hearing loss should be on an equal playing field as typical hearing peers. And so we have to get that word out. Over 90% of children who are born deaf are born to hearing parents. So this is not something you're expecting. When you get that diagnosis, it's coming at you from left field. And so in Colorado, the home intervention or the early intervention program is home-based, and it's run through the Colorado School for the Deaf and Blind. So typically your first exposure to a professional in this arena is someone who is wanting you to learn sign language so you can immediately communicate with your child. Well, that birth to 3 period in brain development is critical. So I want all families to know that this program is out there so that you can immediately, from birth, start developing listening skills with your child. So by the time they reach preschool and kindergarten, they're ready for regular public or whatever your neighborhood school is.
And they're not signing, and they're not lip reading.
There's no signing nor lip reading, because again, these children are born with an overdeveloped visual center in their brain. You don't want to strengthen that. You want to take that auditory center that is just sitting around waiting to be stimulated, and you want to bring that forward. Then later on, once they've established oral language, you can always learn sign language as a secondary language, so that you can kind of move in and out of both worlds. But you got to establish that spoken language early.
So Pat, you talked about that birth to 3 window of really getting this auditory verbal therapy going. But you're talking about the kids that are out there. So it's birth to 3, there's some steps in there. What is the high range of age groups that you work with?
Well, we'll work with all children from birth to age 18.
Okay.
Okay. But what you see is, you know, from birth to 3, the results are outstanding. From 3 to 7, about half the children will be on the same level as their hearing peers. And then after age 7, it starts to drop off. So you can always improve listening, you can always improve speech, but I'm talking about the difference between what you and I traditionally think of deaf talk versus a child who's indistinguishable from their hearing peers.
Sure.
So there is a
big difference to start early. Now, is insurance cover all this for parents?
Some insurances do. Not all insurance covers speech language rehab services. And that was really where the origin of the Listen Foundation came from. Parents who had been through this program looked at each other and said, these results are so outstanding, this should be made available to all children, not just children whose parents have the resources to pay for it. So our main mission is to raise funds so that we can support children who come from families that could never afford this. Can you imagine being deaf and being from a low-income family? You don't have a chance in life.
Right.
You know, so we want, if we invest in these children at an early age, they're off and running. They are no longer the responsibility of society.
Right. Well, and that kind of leads me to this next question about sort of the lifetime costs associated with the disability. And I think that's the right word. But what is the difference in the lifetime cost between those that learn to sign or lip read versus those that understand how to speak and listen?
Mm-hmm. That is really the fork in the road. You know, what is your choice? If I choose a sign language approach for my child, this is, you know, what we're looking at. We're looking at a child who can't communicate with everyone, even their family members. Most parents who learn sign language never get beyond a kindergarten level. So you cannot fully communicate with your own child. That child is going to go to school, and by the age of 17, typically will have a reading level of the 3rd or 4th grade.
Wow.
45% of children who sign don't even graduate from high school, and only 5% go on to college.
Wow.
So you look at the lifetime cost of medical costs, special education costs, under and unemployment, and you're looking at $1.2 million that society assumes.
Per child.
Per child. Conversely, you go through an auditory verbal therapy program, it for an entire year costs $5,000 for a child.
Oh my gosh.
You have this program for 4 or 5 years, and that child is independent, excelling at school because this is a literacy-based program. So auditory verbal kids who are deaf tend to score higher in reading than their typical hearing peers because they have such a strong literacy foundation when they enter school.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So, you know, my whole goal is to look at changing expectations for these kids. This is really what it's all about. We all have our stereotype of what we think a deaf child can achieve, and when they achieve that, we're like, woohoo, they're doing great. But I say, no, they're doing terrible because you should be comparing them to hearing children. There should be no difference in language and speech, in academics, in socialization. That's where we need to get the public to understand, is that this is what can happen with these children. So you can mitigate that disability.
Yeah, advocacy is one that you really need to, as a parent, finding out that their child is deaf in the hospital. Do they know automatically that there's this
auditory verbal therapy? No.
Yes.
No, because, like I said, their first professional that they meet is not an auditory verbal therapist, typically. It would be a deaf educator.
Which is a sign language
which is more sign language based. Or they're introduced to a program that is called total communication, where you learn a little bit of everything, a little bit of listening, a little bit of sign language, a little bit of lip reading, you know, thinking that if you introduce a child to all methodologies, that sounds like it would be a good thing, doesn't it? But the research shows is that you have to focus on the listening and spoken language. If that's what your outcome that you want for your child, you have to start right away with that methodology.
So it's really coming back, Pat, to the first thing one of the first things that you said was that one of those critical barriers is sort of that outreach. And then it requires sort of a paradigm shift, if you will, in the healthcare industry, as well as the education industry, to sort of see this shift in what the outcome looks like, correct?
Right, exactly. Exactly, because if you knew that outcome was available to you, you would demand it right away.
You would demand it in a minute, and you wouldn't even waste your time or resources on any of the others. So I guess my question is are there therapists, are there enough folks out there that if this paradigm shift really happened and this outreach could hit scale, are there enough people trained to be able to do this kind of auditory verbal therapy in Colorado as well as
for
nationally?
Every deaf child.
For every deaf child.
In Colorado, we have 6 certified auditory verbal therapists.
Wow.
There's probably just a little over 200 worldwide. Back in the 1980s, Listen was actually responsible for the training. It's a postgraduate training. It takes many, many hours, not only of the academic piece, but also the mentoring piece to achieve this national certification. And so back in the 80s, Listen taught that to speech language pathologists and audiologists throughout the world. They would come to Denver and get their training. Then they would go back to their state or their country and start their own program. So if you look at all the auditory verbal therapy programs in the world, they all track back to the Listen Foundation. Wow. Now, you know, that's not something that we could maintain. So today, A.G. Bell National, outside of Washington, D.C., they're now responsible for the training. And they looked at this problem and they said, it takes so much to become an auditory verbal therapist, maybe we can have different levels of certification so we can get more people out there. And so now they have a listening and spoken language specialist certification that you can get that doesn't require as much training, but at least gets the listening and spoken language out there more in the general arena. And then if you want to go on and get your auditory verbal therapy certification, you can, but it's getting more people out there. So they're very successful in staging it now.
One thing I think is really important for our listeners to know is how they can make a difference as individuals, or how corporations can really help you along in first outreach, advocacy, and getting the support that you need in order for every child that comes to your facility opportunity to go through the program.
And that's really the crux of it. You know, once the word is out, then we need the funds to be able to support these children. We have now launched a teletherapy program so that kids in the rural part of the state or outside of the state can actually get this therapy through Skype.
Oh, that's great.
And the beauty of it is that this is a parent-centered therapy. The parent is actually our primary client. We teach the parent how to work with the child. So they go home and the parent can work with the child 24/7, because you're not going to get these results with an hour of therapy a week. It requires total family involvement. And so that's why it's so cost effective too, because you're only with the professional an hour a week, and then you're with mom or dad the rest of the time working on listening and spoken language.
And you recognize if somebody wants to take on 2 or 3 children, that's $15,000 with a almost $4 million benefit to our society.
Right, absolutely.
I mean, that is small dollars. And so in terms of the benefits, and then these children can actually function with everybody in the communities around them. To me, this is a clear example of social impact, of how you as an organization can make a social impact by just sponsoring 1 or 2 children going through these programs, and the benefits that we gain from our not only the individual that's going through the program, but our tax base and helping the society, individuals succeed.
So Pat, tell listeners how they can learn more about the fantastic programs going on at the Listen Foundation.
There's several ways. They can always reach me at the Listen office. Again, my name's Pat Greenway. I'm the executive director, and the number at Listen is 303-781-9440. They can go on the internet and look up listenfoundation.org and find out more of the structure of the foundation. I have a very active Facebook and Twitter site, so if they're social media folks, they can go that route. So there's many ways that they can reach us.
Well, Pat, it was so interesting to learn about what a fantastic organization you have at the Listen Foundation, and to learn more about the Listen Foundation, call Pat directly at 303-781-9440 or go online to listenfoundation.org. And now, Cristin, we're going to talk with Karl Brummert, the executive director for the Audubon Society of Greater Denver. And you know, this organization is much different than the Listen Foundation. It's not just locally based, but has a local impact as well as a national impact, perhaps a global impact. I'm not really quite sure. So talk to me a little bit about that.
I think you're going to find that they're a little bit more than what you traditionally think of the Audubon Society. I'm really excited to have Karl here. Karl.
Well, Karl, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So Karl, talk a little bit about the Audubon Society. What is it, and is it just birds?
Well, it's known nationally as a birding organization. The National Audubon Society, that's their big thing. But there are about 400 chapters, over 400 chapters across the country, and so we're the local chapter, the Denver chapter. And we do focus on birds, but we also focus on the natural environment of the Denver area. In order to have birds, you need habitat and all the other things that go with the habitat. So, so we do focus on different parts of that.
Right. And the ecosystems are pretty important to the birds.
Absolutely.
And frankly, to us as human beings.
Yes.
And so what types of things are you doing at the Audubon to, first of all, tell the location of where you're located and in the Denver metro area, but most of them are in the more of the forest areas of the urban areas of cities.
Right, right. A lot of the Audubon chapters, or a lot of Audubon centers are now located in urban areas. Our nature center is located at Chatfield State Park, right across from Waterton Canyon. And we have a building there where we offer programs, not just on the weekends, but we have school groups that come out there as well. We have a lot of school groups that come out, mostly in the spring, but also throughout the year, fall, and sometimes we have camp programs in the summer too.
So when you're doing those things, outside of just talking about the habitats and the environments, birding's a popular pastime for people.
It is.
How is the organization sort of bridging both education as well as more of the hobby enthusiast or the birding enthusiast?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think birding it's like the second most popular hobby in the country after gardening. A lot of people do bird feeding, feed birds in their yard, and a lot of people do go bird watching. A lot of our members either do both. They'll do, some people they just like to do the feeding the birds in their yards, and then we do have some of the folks that really like to go out and, I guess you can say, the hardcore birding.
Yeah.
I would love for you to talk about the bird banding.
The bird banding,
yeah.
I know. I figured you were going to ask about that.
Because that's amazing. You have to bring your children out to see the bird banding.
Yes, we do at our nature center at Chatfield. We have every May we do something called bird banding, and it's a scientific research. It's actual scientific research where they do put up bird nets. They're very fine mist nets, and the birds don't see them, so they fly into these nets. And the scientists take these birds out and we bring them to what we call our bird banding station. It's a pavilion, and the scientist there has the bird in her hand, and we have school groups that come out, or families. I know Cristin's family has come out, and she has the bird right there, and they do the measurements on the birds. And they take the measurements, they weigh them, but then they talk about why they're doing this. We do it in the spring because of the migrating birds. Yeah. Birds are migrating at that time of year, so we get a lot of different kinds of birds. And then at some point, after she's done doing that, sometimes she'll let the kids touch the bird, and then she'll pick one child to release the bird.
Oh, that's
neat. It's
Very
really
fun.
People love it. And I've had a lot of people who are not even really interested in birding that will come out and just come see these.
It's an amazing experience, a scientific experience right in front of your children.
Well, and I know my boss's daughter, she went to Nebraska and did this bird banding activity, and she did it with whooping cranes that were migrating. And so they just sat there for really long periods of time waiting. And then when they came, it was like this great experience because they're not very common.
And this is just happening
and
in Chatfield.
It's just happening right down
here.
the road.
Yes,
I love that.
Yes.
Well, Karl, when we come back, we have to run to break, but when we come back, we'll be talking more about what you're doing over at the Audubon Society. But before we go to break, how can people learn about your organization or contact you to bring their groups out to learn about banding or any of those things?
Sure. They can call us at 303-973-9530. Or just go to our website at denveraudubon.org.
Okay, when we come back, we'll have more with Karl and Cristin. Welcome back to Driving Force Radio, where we seek to discover what drives today's leaders. On today's show, we're talking about community matters and how corporations and individuals of any size can come together and really connect with community and nonprofit organizations for social impact wherever they are. And my co-host today is Cristin Tarr, and our guest is Karl Brummert, the Executive Director for the Audubon Society of Greater Denver. Welcome back. Karl?
Thank you.
And what I find is many organizations look at, corporations look at different ways that they can connect to the communities. There's many that are interested in connecting with outdoors, and I think yours is a great nonprofit to really look at, and when they're looking at community giving and community volunteerism, they can work with your organization. Tell us a little bit about how you are connected to the, how your organization serves our community and serves individuals, your members, and so forth.
Okay. Well, as we do a lot of school programs, both at the schools and at our nature center. Because we're so far south in Denver, it's hard for a lot of schools to come down to our center. So usually that transportation is it's a lot of times it's costly for the schools, and it's hard to get the students down there. So that's one area that we're always looking for ways for people to help us. Help get more of those children down to the nature center. We do get a lot of programs down there, but one thing we're starting to do now, we're piloting this year, and we did receive a grant for this, was to do a longer term program with the schools rather than just going to the school once, doing a program, and then that's it. We want to do a longer term program. A lot of our programs are science based because of the environmental science or ecology. We do incorporate writing and some other disciplines in that as well. But so this year we have 2 schools that we're working with. It's actually interesting with your previous guest. We were working with a school in Highlands Ranch that has deaf children, and we're piloting a year-long program with them, going to the school, doing different lessons there, and then having them come down to our nature center. Coming down to our nature center was a little bit of a barrier for them, so we were able to get that grant to do that. To do this with other schools, though, we will need money, more money or funding to be able to do that, or we're partnering with the schools to do that.
Well, and Karl, I would assume too with STEM education, it's such a central point right now here in the United States. This programming around environmental sciences as well as biological sciences and all of those things that go on around the sciences, as well as the engineering and math issues that go on with this. I mean, there are so many things you could learn with this that potentially this STEM linkage could really provide some cool benefits to the community. Sure. Can you address that a little bit and how the Audubon's work potentially fits into the STEM issue?
Well, a lot of, as I was mentioning, a lot of what we cover is science, biology. We do try to incorporate math. We're starting to do more some of the chemistry too, with the water quality at the nature center. We have some ponds there, and we do pond studies there, and we're starting to incorporate some of the chemistry that goes with testing the water quality. So a lot of schools are looking for that science connection, and a lot of times the teachers may not know how to do the science, or how to incorporate that into what they need to teach. And so we can bring that in using birds and nature and pond ecology and things like that. I think that really is, and we've talked to some of the teachers, and they are really, the teacher that we're working with in Highlands Ranch is very appreciative that we're there to help them teach this science, because a lot of times they may not have that background that we may have, and they may not have those resources that we have. A lot of the schools may not have a nature center to go to, or these scientists to do these actual programs with. So
and connecting kids with nature is also a big emphasis.
Absolutely, yes. I'm glad you brought that up, because that is another big thing that we do, is trying to get kids outdoors. Besides the STEM, it's the whole health issues that a lot of kids are not getting outside anymore. Because of TVs or computers or phones and all of that, a lot of kids are staying indoors. So what we do is we try to incorporate with a lot of our family programs. We have a nature program for preschoolers and their moms, for example, and that's getting kids outdoors. We're trying to get them outdoors and exploring the nature that's right in their own neighborhoods. They don't necessarily have to go all the way to the mountains to go see nature. I mean, it's right in their own neighborhoods. And that's the great thing about birds. Going back to birds.
Yeah. I mean,
they're everywhere.
There's a lot of connections that corporations and individuals can really connect onto. Is there a project, a longer-term project that a corporation can really help you with? I know you mentioned the youth program, but how can they really make an impact on your organization and basically the community?
Well, definitely we will need more support with trying to do more of those longer term programs with the schools. We will need support with that. A lot of times corporations, folks there, we are like a lot of nonprofits. We're looking for expertise in marketing and accounting and a lot of those different areas, or publicity. So if they can help us in those areas too. Even looking for board members. Again, a lot of nonprofits are looking for board members. And corporations can help in that way. We do have volunteer projects at our nature center. There's always something that needs to be done down there to upkeep the nature center and keep that fresh and new. We have native plant gardens there to teach people how to plant native plants in their yards. So they can help that way too. So there's a lot of different areas, but I know one thing we're trying to do is really reach more schools. Probably more urban schools.
Well, I just was with a DPS school that some of the kids came out to Littleton, which is north of your area, not much, and the kids said this was country for them. And so going down to the visitor center, which is not that much farther, I mean, basically it's a 20-minute ride from some of the DPS schools. So if you're saying if a corporation helps with the transportation and helps with basically the organization of, once you get them down there, you can organize the whole programs, because that's what you know. And then do you want to be able to get into the schools themselves, having outreach into the schools?
Absolutely, yes. We do like to go to the schools several times, and that's part of this whole year-long project, is going to the schools, because we want the kids to also know that nature, as I was mentioning before, nature is in their backyard. They don't have to go all the way down to the nature center, although we would like them to.
Right.
It is good for them to see that there are other areas, but we try to teach them about nature in their own backyard. So we like to do a lot of.
And they don't have to go to the
schools.
Mountains. They have a great visitor center where you're located.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Exactly. And we do have a lot of volunteers, but we do need professional staff, and that takes, that's not free.
Right, absolutely. Well, Karl, we've been talking about successful partnerships in the show today, and how community partnerships really do matter. Have you had a successful partnership historically that's really brought a lot of change or brought a great result to the Audubon Society?
We have. We actually started a partnership with the Wingate Hotel. That's
through Business Service Corps.
Yep, through you. They came down to our nature center. They actually came to us. They chose us because they were having a problem with a woodpecker pecking on their building. So,
and they were very helpful, weren't you?
We did. We tried to give them a lot of different advice to help them, get rid of that woodpecker, and we even gave them this big, woodpecker house, because a lot of times that's what that woodpecker is looking for. But they came down to our nature center and helped us with some projects down there, and in return, they've also been letting us use their hotel for our board meetings, which is kind of nice for us to get out of our offices and go somewhere that feels a little bit more professional. So we have been using every other month. We could do our board meetings at the Wingate Hotel. So, and there's other companies that we work with too.
They always give you a nice silent auction. And
they do. They give a silent auction. Yes.
And then what was nice for the Wingate, they had team building opportunities. They were able to really integrate their staff on working together on this project, and they came out several times, and they continue to come out to help them out with various volunteer projects, which is nice.
Yeah,
That's
manager
awesome.
comes out a lot. Yes.
That's awesome. So, Karl, what's the most important thing the Audubon Society here in Denver needs and or wants this holiday season? What do you hope to What do you hope to see going forward here in the next 3 to 6 months?
3 to 6 months. Boy, that's a really good question. Well, we definitely would like to have a very successful Colorado Gives Day.
Absolutely.
That would be nice.
That's coming right up.
On December 4th.
On December 4th.
And you have a nice matching program that's going on also with that, right? With the
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Through the First Bank, it was a match to Community First, and then they give that to a lot of the nonprofits.
Yep, absolutely. And Colorado Gives Day, for listeners that don't know, is December 4th, and you go online at givingfirst.org, look up the Denver Audubon Society, and make your donations there, and there will be matching donations from First Bank here in Colorado. Karl, we're running out of time, but I want to say thank you so much for being with us. This was really interesting.
Well, thank you for having me.
And I can't wait to bring my Girl Scout troop, my Boy Scout troops, and everybody down to Chatfield. That'll be awesome. Well, thank you. And Cristin, We'll be back for more, but to learn more about the Denver Audubon Society, go to denveraudubon.org or give them a call if you want to take your group down, 303-973-9530. Now joining us is Kerri Drumm, the Future Options Program Manager for Denver Kids, Inc. And Denver Kids, Inc. is this really unique program that has this great partnership here in the Denver metro area with Denver Public Schools, and works with kids K through 12 who face personal challenges of higher risk environments to successfully complete high school. And so they're really out there looking at getting kids through high school and then getting them onto this post-secondary path to get them into jobs and other things, Cristin.
Absolutely. I think this is a classic example of collaboration and how that working together you can have an incredible outcome. Some of the stats you will be amazed with.
Absolutely. Kerri, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So Kerri, give us a little bit of background on Denver Kids, Inc. and some of those demographics. What does your constituency look like?
Sure. So we serve students in Denver Public Schools K through 12 who are living at or below the poverty line. We also work with students who are coming from single-parent homes. So about 82% of our students come from a single-parent home. So it's a long-term preventative educational counseling program. We're really holistic in nature. So once the child is in the program, we stay with them until they graduate. We walk with them all the way through their pathway. And the major intervention is the educational counselor. So each student is matched one-on-one with an educational counselor that helps them get rid of any barriers to their success. So these might be social barriers, economic barriers, cultural barriers. They work together in partnership with the student to kind of get them through to the finish line. So that's one major component of the program. We also have a mentoring program. So about 30% of our students have a volunteer mentor that works with them in addition to their educational counselor that provides extra support. And we're really proud of our mentoring program because we require a one-year commitment from our mentors, but the average length of stay is 5 years.
Wow.
So our mentors really stay with the students, again, to kind of get them through, get them across the finish line.
Well, and you have such a great story here. Last year alone, the 2011-2012 school year, 974 kids were participating in the program at 151 different DPS schools. But here's the staggering number. I'm stunned by this. 91% graduation rate from your kiddos, which is compared to a 56% graduation rate district-wide. Those numbers are staggering. So obviously, these mentoring programs and this counseling is working. Yes?
And we're really, really proud of that number, that 91%, because as you mentioned, Denver Public Schools graduates about 56% of their students, which is a number that's been growing. But that's kind of common across the whole nation for these big urban districts. You know, it's difficult to get these students across the finish line. When we look at students that are living at or below the poverty level, that number drops to about 36% in DPS. Wow. So the students that we serve in Denver Public Schools are only graduating about 36%, but we managed to get 91% to graduation. So it feels really great.
That is,
congratulations. That's stunning.
We need to hear this, and this model needs to be known. And so that tell me a little bit about the history.
Sure.
And who the collaborators on it, and in addition, the demographics of the students that you are.
Sure. Yeah. So I love talking about the history because I think it's a really interesting story. We started in about 1946 when Denver Rotary was communicating with some people inside Denver Public Schools to talk about the dropout rates because boys were dropping out of high school when their fathers weren't coming back from World War II. So this was a problem. They were noticing this problem. So they started Denver Kids as a way to serve Denver boys. And in about the 70s, they started noticing that girls were dropping out of high school due to teen pregnancy. So they started Denver Girls. So this is DPS and Denver Kids and Denver Boys and Denver Girls working together. Later on down the road, in about the 90s, they decided to merge to become Denver Kids, Inc. At that time, we brought a third sponsoring organization on, which was Denver Active 2030. So it's really neat because there's kind of four of us working together, Denver Rotary, Denver Public Schools, Denver Active 2030, and they all sponsor us to make what we're doing possible.
Which is phenomenal. Now, how did you get involved?
Well, I came from a pretty interesting background. I was an educator before. I was a teacher, and then I did some work internationally with UNHCR, which is the UN agency that resettles refugees. So when I came back to Denver, I really wanted to stay engaged in that kind of work, but I didn't know how. So I started looking around, and I found out that Denver Public Schools actually has specific programs for these types of students that don't speak English and that maybe didn't go to school before they were resettled here in Colorado.
And they're refugees that have legally come over here, and they've given a second chance almost.
Exactly.
And now sometimes the systems across the countries have failed them because it's not the right environment for them to thrive.
And you can imagine how challenging it would be to come from a refugee camp and be plopped down in a second or third grade classroom in Denver. So the reason I was attracted to Denver Kids is because it does allow for that one-on-one specialized intervention. So I knew if I worked with Denver Kids to serve these students, they would be getting exactly what they needed instead of a one-size-fits-all kind of solution.
Absolutely.
So I started as a counselor, and now I've since become the Future Options Program Manager, because I really believe, of course, our job is to get them across the finish line, but then also to make sure that everyone becomes, productive members of society. We've got to give them a place to go. We've got to give them some options for when they're done.
Absolutely. So talk about some of those recent achievements at Denver Kids. Obviously, you're making great strides, but talk about that, and what are some of the plans for the future?
Sure. So we just finished a 3-year strategic development plan, which included a lot of incremental growth. So we ended up serving about 25% more students in the past 3 years than we had served before, which we're proud of, because in a time when a lot of nonprofits are really feeling the strain of the economy, we're actually growing. And we're rolling out a really exciting strategic development plan for the future. We're calling it our 2020 vision. And basically what happened is we started looking at what was going on inside DPS. Denver Public Schools is the fastest urban school district, fastest growing urban school district in the nation. Wow. So it's just growing at this crazy rate. So we know it's growing, but yet there's still these cracks in the system, especially for low-income youth. They're not graduating. So we looked at the numbers and we said there's 14,000 students in Denver Public Schools that could benefit from our services that are not receiving our services. So as we're growing, if there's all these need there and the district is growing but the needs aren't being met, what do we do? So we decided we wanted to become an impact player and really move the needle on this graduation rate. So we're rolling out this 2020 vision. We hope by 2020 we'll be helping Denver Public Schools graduate between 17 and 18% of these low-income students that otherwise wouldn't be graduating.
Wow.
So
in addition to some of those numbers that you had in the past.
Exactly. This is going to be a big growth plan. We're going to be hiring a bunch more counselors. We're going to be serving a lot more students. Right now we graduate around 50 to 60 students a year, and we want to be graduating about 400 by 2020.
Which is amazing. Just some statistics that you sent me earlier, which just is astounding. As Jan mentioned, that a 91% graduation rate, 38% were the first in their family to earn a high school degree. 38%. 91% of the children that you have served were below or live at at or below the poverty line. 82% live in single family homes. That to me, the most. Let me read one more. The most Denver Kids enters our program in elementary school and are enrolled in our program for the average of 6.5 years. So you see them. What we've heard a lot. Cradle to graduation or cradle to career.
Yep.
And this is a portion of the cradle to career. So if a corporation or business or individual wants to see this transition, they can see some real clear impacts that are making.
Tremendous impacts. Well, we know that a high school dropout costs the society about $400,000 in lost wages, in social programs, in criminal justice systems. So that's a lot of money that we're spending for our high school dropouts. Now, in Denver Kids, it costs us about $8,000 for the entire time a child is in the program to get them across the finish line.
Wow.
So you can see the amount of return on investment that really you're getting by investing in our youth and investing in our kids. And as far as for businesses and corporations, it's really a benefit to them too, because everyone wants a well-educated, articulate workforce. So, if these students do drop out, the chances of them then going on to becoming productive members of society is much diminished.
And some of these kids are global citizens already. And so now putting them into the workforce as really contributors by just investing $8,000 is, to me, a no-brainer. Why are people doing it?
It's not just $8,000. If you break that down even more and you really look at that return on investment on a 6.5 year engagement, $8,000
per year.
It's
$8,000 total.
It ends up being less than $1,200 a year to mitigate the problem of $400,000 on a dropout problem. And again, back to this 91% graduation rate, 94% of those 91% go on to some post-secondary education. So here it is again, where you're not saying you've got to go to four-year college or whatever, but vocational programs, community college programs, all those kinds of things, trades. You're really out there giving them all these options around job creation as well as personal growth, and not saying this one size fits all of you. You don't all have to go to Harvard and Yale to get it going.
Exactly, and we believe that's why it works.
Yeah,
because when you meet people where they are and you give them what they need, they're going to be successful. So it just takes a little bit of extra time and a little bit of extra love. But I think the big thing the reason why it works is the time. It's not like we come in for a year. We say this is what you need to do to be successful. We walk with you and we watch you grow up and help you get plugged into the things that are best suited to you. So yeah, it's pretty exciting.
Wow. I don't think corporations and individuals recognize the importance of getting involved and looking at the impact that they can make. Give me an example, and I know in general what you told me, give me an example of a corporation came to you and said, okay, we want to sponsor a couple kids. We don't want to just write a check. What can we really do to get involved in your organization and make a bigger difference?
Sure. Well, there's lots of different ways people can get involved. One way in the bigger picture is just to go out and advocate for the closing of the achievement gap and improvements in education. Anyone can do that. You don't have to come to Denver Kids to do that. Anyone can do that. Another thing that corporations and individuals can do is become volunteer mentors. So that's a one-year commitment where they come in and they really work intensely with the student in their homes and in their families. And then especially with our 2020 growth plan, we're really looking for businesses and corporations to come on board to help us with some capacity building, some financial support as we're making this big expansion. We really need a lot of members of the community to step up and say, you know what, we believe in this. We believe that these kids deserve an education, and we're going to come together to do that. So there's lots of different ways. We also always look for volunteers for our events to help us with our events. To transport kids, we're starting to develop some job training skills, so job shadowing opportunities. There's lots of different ways you can get involved.
Wow. And it's pretty dynamic, which that tells me that it's an organization where you you can align quite easily. Your organization your corporation or business can line quite easily into the value that they can give to you, and certainly they'll get value back because of seeing the impact and also the individual impact, the passion that you have helping a child, helping a youth succeed.
Well, Kerri, how can people learn more about Denver Kids Inc. and the work that you're doing? I mean, amazing results going on at Denver Kids.
Well, they can check us on our website, which is www.denverkidsinc.org. They can also give us a call at 720-423-0695, or they can send us an email at info@dpsk12.org. We also have a Facebook page, Google,
so just
everywhere.
Just find you.
Yep.
And then, Kerri, the last two organizations are part of Colorado Gives Day. Is Denver Kids also participating?
Denver Kids is also part of Colorado Gives Day, so you can find us that way too. That would be a great time to come and show your support for the Denver community and our youth here in DPS.
Absolutely, and it's a matching donation from First Bank. So go to givingfirst.org and look up Denver Kids Inc. On their website and give on December 4th, yes?
Yes, that would be tremendous.
And help them with the 2020 plan.
Yes.
Help them with the 2020 plan. Kerri, last thought. What is the most important thing you need from the community right now to achieve the 2020 plan?
Financial support at this point to roll out. We want to hire a bunch of new counselors in order to serve a lot more students. So that would be really, really, really beneficial. But just also becoming advocates for these students in your own community, in your own home, talking about the achievement gap, talking about how we're going to get low-income kids across the finish line and help them be successful. So there's lots of ways you can start.
Kerri, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
And Cristin, what a great show today.
It was really good. And I hope the listeners understood that if you really look at the long-term alignment and sustainability of your giving in a different way, and you try to help with these impacts that we just saw, 3 wonderful stories of how you can actually get involved, give a check, but also volunteer, and also in kind of expertise, pro bono work, and work towards the goal that they're trying to accomplish rather than just a one-time. It makes a difference. That's going to be the community change that we need.
It absolutely is making a difference. And these 3 organizations are absolute proof of stuff that is going on in our communities right under our noses, social impact-wise, and we can all engage. So If you're interested, go learn more about their organizations, denverkidsinc.org, listenfoundation.org, and then the Denver Audubon, which is denveraudubon.org, or on Colorado Gives Day, December 4th, go to givingfirst.org. Remember, community does matter. Go out there and make a change for the better.